Hey everyone, how's it going? So this is going to be a rant on David Duke. I just watched his Jim Rizzoli interview, and I actually went back and watched a couple David Duke episodes because I really wanted to get everything in context here and write down some quotes from him. So one of the giant red flags that sort of awoke me to what David Duke might possibly be, because I don't know. I'm not one of these people like Alex Jones where I'm going to go out and say, this is definitive, this is axiomatic, this is what it is, you need to believe it, and if you don't, then you're crazy. You're just as crazy as the MSM, right? So, if you didn't know who Don Black is, he was the creator of Stormfront, the website that just got recently taken down. Turns out him and David Duke have a long history together. In fact, it goes back to before the 1980s. Because in the early 1980s, David Duke and him actually got together in a little group and had a bunch of other people who believed similar ways that they still do now. And they actually came up with this paramilitary operation, and it was called Operation Red Dog, which is what you were seeing right here. And I'm going to include this link in here. And I'm not including the Wikipedia link as to be a definitive source of, or an objective source of information in any sense. Please, don't quote me as trying to say that. I'm just trying to point out to you that there was an operation that David Duke was involved in. And basically what happens is, another nickname for it is the Bayou of Pigs. So what happened was him, David Duke, and Don Black and a few other people got together, and they were going to storm Grenada with... It's essentially the same thing as the Bay of Pigs. They wanted to get a bunch of people from different areas around Grenada to join in a paramilitary operation and overthrow the government. Well, what happened was so it was originally Grenada, and it ended up getting changed to a different island or wherever else. And after it ended up getting changed, a lot of people fell out because they didn't know that that's what was going to happen. They wanted to overthrow Grenada, the communist government there, and essentially it fell through, especially once federal agents caught a couple people with a bunch of weapons and boats and plans to do this. And that was the first red flag for me. The second one was the whole Charlottesville situation. So David Duke went on his show, and he actually had the audacity to say the following. You ready for this? Charlottesville, this is verbatim. I'm not misquoting them. I don't like misrepresenting people like the mainstream media does, or Alex Jones. I will represent them accurately. Quote-unquote, Charlottesville was a victory for our people. Now, I don't even understand what he means by our people. Does he mean white people? Does he mean European people? Does he mean people in his movement? What does he mean by our people? Second off, how was it a victory? How was it a victory to have a bunch of minorities, Black Lives Matter, dumb trendies, liberals in general, mainstream media, alternative media like Mike Cernovich, the shill, Alex Jones, the shill, all the people, Gavin McInnes, all the shills out there, condemn your group, and then not only condemn your group, condemn everything that they stood for, and then not only that, now they associate anyone who questions Jewish power with the alternative right. So essentially, if you come out and you say, I am against the Jewish power in this country, I'm against the Jews owning all the media outlets and running all of our Hollywood films, you will be considered an alt-righter. How is that a victory? It wasn't. And another thing that sort of confirmed this to me was when Jim Rizzoli was interviewing him, like I mentioned, he actually asked David Duke and said, you know, what's up with this? Why would you guys go to a rally where there were admitted agents there on both sides? And David Duke pulled the most epic digression I have ever seen in my entire life. Watch the Jim Rizzoli video. It's amazing. He doesn't even answer the question. He just completely avoided answering the question. At least Alex Jones, when he semi-answers a question then digresses, at least he'll pretend like he's answering it. David Duke didn't even pretend like he was going to answer that. He just went off into some other tangent. It was amazing. It really was simply amazing. And then in the Jim Rizzoli video, which I really suggest you guys watch, I'm going to include that in the link for the description too. I'm also going to include a link about the next thing I'm going to talk about. So David Duke, just the whole entire Jim Rizzoli episode, a majority of it, a large majority of it, he went on about his whole racial theory nonsense and all his garbage, and I'm a historian, so you can just go back and look at the documents and you'll understand this and you'll see. Like, everything David Duke says is just axiomatic and just accepted. So he spouted this nonsense, and I'm going to quote him again verbatim. Thousands of years of Jewish interbreeding, quote unquote. Thousands of years. First off, even Jewish scholars don't accept that nonsense. It's just complete garbage. And then what does he do? He goes on to cite the Bible as one of the major sources. The Bible. Now, unfortunately for David Duke, I don't think he's ever picked up a Bible, or if he has, he probably read a few passages out of it, or whatever the preacher or the priest says at his Catholic church. But if you actually read Genesis, or even just the Torah in general, you will see that this whole theory of not proselytizing people and not intermarrying people, not going out and marrying Gentiles, is nonsense. It didn't happen until the Second Temple, which was, what, around 500 BC? And then the temple got destroyed in 70 AD, so 570 years. And even then, the Pharisees were against not proselytizing people. Not as all the Pharisees were, but a large majority of them were, and I'll include the link to Jewish sources that say that. And even if you look back, look at Abraham, or Abram, all the way back in the beginning. They weren't Jews by race. Sarah wasn't a Jew by race. Even Moses wasn't a Jew by race. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. But to understand why it's nonsense, you have to understand his own bias towards this, his confirmation bias. And what confirmation bias is where you have this belief, this set of beliefs, and what you do is when you go out and you research and you want to validate those beliefs, you basically ignore anything that contradicts your belief. And you just accept things that confirm your belief. The whole confirmation bias concept, right? That's what it is in a nutshell. And since David Duke has this sort of racial ideology, he has to find ways to confirm it. And if there is no such thing as a Jewish race, that's a whole dismissal of a majority of his arguments, that this is all race-related and that Jews behave this way because it's their race and all this nonsense. It's really simple once you break it down. But if you're very ignorant to these things, you will hear David Duke and you'll probably say, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. And he does on certain topics. I'll give him that. He helped me awaken to the truth, the reality around us of the Jewish supremacists that control the media, Hollywood, started the Federal Reserve. And it was amazing, too, because David Duke even said something. This is sort of digressing a little bit, but he said that the Jews took over the Federal Reserve. That's verbatim a quote. The Jews took over the Federal Reserve. A Jew created the Federal Reserve. Max Warburg? Have you ever heard of him? Have you ever heard of the Warburgs? Well, they were and Paul Warburg, they were both very outspoken when it came to creating the Federal Reserve System. And they actually based it off of the European banking system, which was a heavily Jewish-influenced banking system. So in fact, they're the ones who created the Federal Reserve. They didn't just take it over. Just because they had a few Gentiles in between being the chairman doesn't mean it wasn't a Jewish creation. Doesn't mean it wasn't owned by Jews. So I don't know where David Duke got that from. But anyways, and then he also includes, this is going to be the last thing I'm going to address. He always says this. He always says this, and I don't understand where he gets this data or this information. I really don't. He says Jews are all related, like fifth cousins. So even if there is some scientific, or pseudoscientific nonsense out there that promotes that, how does that make any sense if you think about it logically? You're going to tell me right now Ivanka Trump is related to Jared Kushner somehow as their fifth cousins? Oh, but she was a proselyte, right? She was a convert. So how do you know that all these people out there that claim to be Jews, their family members didn't convert years ago? How do you know that? Exactly, you don't know that. That's just another thing that makes his whole racial theory nonsensical. You don't know if 5 generations ago your family converted into Judaism. You don't know that. Just like all the Europeans throughout the medieval times, all the Jews that were dispersed and tossed out of random nations and ended up converting and pretending to be Christians. You don't know that your family came from a Jew? How would you know that? You wouldn't know for sure that, oh yeah, my Catholic ancestor, turns out he was a Jewish convert, and he has Jewish blood, so I have Jewish blood. It's just nonsense. And we know from just generalized DNA studies that you can literally have a child right now, and then that child has children, and there's a chance, not a large chance, but there's a chance that their DNA, in other words, your grandchild's DNA, could be vastly different than your DNA. Vastly different. So we know for a fact that DNA changes rapidly over generations. So all of this is just complete nonsense. But David Duke, with his candid attitude, comes out and just smiles while he lies to you. Unbelievable. It just sickens me that this awakening of people is being taken over by a double agent. I really genuinely believe he is a double agent. So, thank you guys for tuning in yet again. I just find this to be so repulsive to have somebody be such a traitor to the truth. Let me say one more thing, sorry. Have you guys noticed too, because I haven't watched Duke in a while, since I said last time I would stop watching him. I really haven't. But I noticed now that the media is paying attention to David Duke again, did you notice that he's saying Zio and Zionist instead of Jew or Jewish? Did you notice that? He always does this. I even noticed it back in the day. I would notice there'd be weeks on end where he wouldn't mention Jewish supremacism. He'd mention, oh, the Zio control of our government, the Zio government. I argue that even if Zionism didn't exist, they would still be doing exactly what they're doing now. How can you explain all the legends in the medieval times of the Jewish usurer? Because they've been doing this for hundreds of years. So anyways, it's all a bunch of nonsense. And, well, that's what I believe, at least from my studies. And I'll include all these links. I'll even include a link to the video of him and Jim Rizzoli so you guys can watch it. To be honest, like I said, the whole video is about the whole racial theory thing. It's basically just David Duke going on a tangent like he always does. It's never anything constructive or anything new. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate all of your support. Even through all the controversial videos I make, which I don't know why my videos seem to be controversial since I usually back them up with sources. So if If you disagree with me, you're just disagreeing with the sources, which is fine, but you should at least submit something that shows that I'm wrong. Don't just say you're wrong and an anti-Semite and just run off or anything, or you're stupid for hating David Duke and just run off and not show me why I'm stupid for hating David Duke. So yeah, thank you guys. Talk to you guys soon.